Joe Angelino, candidate for the 122nd District
of the
New York
Assembly.
State Assembly.
Correct.
All right, so Joe, let's start off with a little bit about your experience. Why don't you take me through your career both in law enforcement and in the military?
Well, Chenango County guy, been in the upstate New York my entire life. I was lucky enough to get a job with as a deputy sheriff under Joe Beninati in the late 70s, early 80s. And at the time, I was getting ready to go to college. And I told that to the sheriff. But college then, I think, cost like $1,900 a year. And he was offering to pay me almost $9,000. But he knew that education was important. And back then, there was a thing called the CETA program, Comprehensive Employment Training Act, under President Carter. So I was working and going to college. At the time, SUNY Morrisville had was offering courses at the Norwich High School. And I took English and some courses for almost 2 years. And under the Department of Labor and CETA, I got a 2-year, I guess back in those days they called it police science. But so when Sheriff Beninati was getting ready to retire, he said, don't anybody here feel loyal to me if you have an opportunity to go someplace else. I lived in Norwich, so I took the Norwich police test, and 1981 was appointed a Norwich police officer, rose through the ranks. A lot of people in the Binghamton area know me because, particularly police officers, because I taught at the Broome County Police Academy for a long time, and teaching new police officers, paramilitary organizational skills and just personal appearance and bearing as an officer. So 1996 became the police chief in Norwich, and did that for almost just shy of 20 years, 18 years, 8 months. And that's where I met you more than once, usually on awful situations, but retired from there. But I've been very active in the community in many sorts of ways. You mentioned the Classic Car Museum. Yes, I'm president of the board there and still on the board. Currently on the Norwich Housing Authority board, which is, when I was in office at the police department, I was aware of the Norwich Housing Authority, but they do some really good work helping people with affordable homes, with a sliding scale of rents, and they're also helping work on some of the homeless population. So I think that's something that I learned a lot in getting involved in the Housing Authority. But I've been a past member of the GHS board, credit union headquartered here in Binghamton, many military organizations, and a lot of civic groups I participate with. After I retired, Assemblyman Crouch, who I've known for years because he was on the county board and was the chairman of the board, and just in the Norwich area, I was aware of him and became friends with him. When I retired, he took me to lunch, and he offered me, he said, I would like some help. And I had just spent, a lifetime helping people. So when a friend of mine said, I'd like some help, he said, for instance, I'll be in Albany next week, can you go to deposit for a meeting on a bridge? I said, I can do that. What do you want me to do? And he said, just take some notes, and if anybody has any issues, let them know you're there representing me, and get back to me. So I did that a few times, and he offered to put me on the payroll, and I didn't like that idea. I didn't want to be the police chief who retired and stepped into a job. I also, more importantly, I wanted to keep my relationship with Cliff, or the assemblyman, as friends, because we had been friends for quite a while. And I didn't want an employee-employer relationship, so I did that for the last 5 years. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. After I did him a favor a few times, I enjoyed it. I was going out, I was meeting a lot of people, and getting to know the whole district. And it's a big, big district. I mean, from Whitney Point, Lisle, Nanticoke, all the way to Walton, Colchester, Downsville, starting up in New Berlin, all the way down to the Pennsylvania border. That's a big district. So put a lot of miles on my truck, and I was happy doing it. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of free time after retirement, and I did that. Now, concurrently, being a police officer, I took a leave of absence from the Norwich Police Department in 1985. I enlisted in the Marines, departed in January of '86, and did a number of years in the Marine Reserves after my initial training. I did 23 years, 8 months in the Marine Corps Reserves, and met a lot of people there, traveled the world several times, and not always just military combat deployments, but to Okinawa, Norway, Thailand, and I got to see how the world operates. And of course, I paid particular attention to how law enforcement worked in all these countries. And I can tell you our law enforcement is probably our criminal justice system is one of the best in the world. It may not be perfect, but boy, there's some scary things I saw. Also, I got to see how clean America is and how filthy some of these other countries are. And again, not talking about combat experience, talking about Thailand, Okinawa, places like that. They just don't have the wherewithal that we have for recycling and clean engine cars and clean diesel trucks and things like that. So we're doing pretty good here in this country, but upstate New York could probably use a little help, in my opinion, to get things changed. First off, we got to stop the out-migration of people. My goodness. Your viewership, I write a column for the Evening Sun, my readership would go up, your viewership would go up, every retail store would have more vibrant sales, but you can't do that with 1,300,000 people leaving upstate New York in less than in the last decade. And the last year, I think it was around 80,000. That's like taking Cortland, Shenango, Otsego County, and every man, woman, child is gone. So, that's the first thing. Stop the out-migration. And how? Onerous taxes and rules, regulations that make people not want to invest in a business here. There's a lot of people paying land taxes that just can't afford it anymore. I didn't mean to ramble on.
No, you're
also,
fine.
When I was talking about, I got off on Thailand and around the world, I also was and still am a member of the fire department. Norwich we're lucky that we have a paid fire crew 24/7, 365 that's backed up by volunteers. So I was a past fire chief in Norwich, 2006 to 2008. The city told me it was going to be temporary, only 3 to 6 months, but it went on for over 2 years. But learned a lot about that and the fire service, and more importantly, the ambulance services in upstate New York. We're at near crisis level. The fire departments, they have the mutual aid, and Broome County, Shenango County have the automatic mutual aid system, a little different in each county, but they get trucks rolling from other departments pretty quickly. It's the ambulance that could happen to anybody that we need to pay attention to, and that's something I'd like to focus on, the volunteer emergency services.
Just one more question about your background. During your time in the Marines, you were called up and saw duty in Iraq, correct?
Yes, first called up in Desert Storm. A lot of people don't even remember that. That was 30 years ago. I spent months in the desert as a tank commander in Desert Storm. And then stayed in the reserves, made my way up the ranks, and was activated in 2003 for the initial invasion of Iraq and participated in the Battle of Nasiriyah. There's a lot of Marines right in this area that I could rattle off names who went with me. So this isn't a one-man show. The Marine Corps is a team, and because we were reserves, the majority of the people came from Central New York, and I went there twice. Once with a rifle company out of Albany, and it was all Central New York Marines. And again, I went in 2005 as part of a small team of about, supposed to be 30, but 28 of us went, and we integrated into the Iraqi army as mentors and leaders, and just to show them, to lead them and teach them to take the fight on their own so that we could leave.
And during that time you were injured and received a Purple Heart.
I was, and I was wounded twice and was awarded 2 Purple Hearts. And I don't talk about that unless I talk about the Marines that I lost. I have friends, namely Mike Glover from upstate New York, John McKenna, graduate from Binghamton University, and Joey Tremblay from Newburgh, New York, actually New Windsor, and Brian Dunlap, a volunteer firefighter from Hawthorne, California. They all received Purple Hearts, but they never saw them. So it's not about me when it comes to that.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
So talk to me some more about what you've learned over these, am I correct, it's been about 5 years that you've been volunteering your time for Cliff?
Yes, 5 years.
So tell me about what you've learned about just even how state government operates and what sort of issues are important to the constituents of the district that are the purview of the state?
Well, first off, it's a very rural district. And the values that this rural district has, the people that I've met and talked to of both parties, because a lot of times Assemblyman Crouch would send me out and never once mentioned this mayor's a Democrat, this supervisor's a Republican. Never, he just said, go and listen. So the politics of that never came into it. But it's a rural district, and a lot of people are just concerned that little by little, nibble by nibble, that huge city in North America called New York, the biggest city in the United States, is just a 2.5-hour ride from here. It's like an hour-and-a-half ride from parts of this district. And they feel that they're being just overrun and their way of life is changing. And I've also learned pretty quickly that because Assemblyman Crouch is in the minority party in the Assembly, that he has to work, if he wants something accomplished, he and Donna Lepardo, Assemblyperson in this region also, the more suburban area, he works well with her together. So that is something I've learned. If it's good for Donna Lepardo's district, it's probably going to be good for Cliff Crouch's district because it almost completely surrounds each other. Also, I've learned that Assemblyman Crouch, being in the minority, doesn't get a lot of money for staff, but I believed in him, and when he said he needed help, I wanted to help. And that's why I've done it for 5 years. I've crossed paths with many people time and time again, and we joke that I was the stunt double because Cliff and I share the same hair color. But I'm interested in helping these people. And even though the Republican Party is outnumbered, I've been outnumbered in fights before, and you still have to have a voice, and you just can't roll over, play dead, and let them run over us. And a lot of people in this rural district feel that way. They feel that their culture, their way of life, their hunting, their sporting is being run over. The Hancock Fire Department, that poor fire chief down there was he was very upset that his job was being threatened because their fundraiser was a coyote hunt. And that's a perfectly lawful thing to do. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but if you own a small dog, a pet cat, you need to know that that's the main diet of coyotes in a not urban, but in a village setting. I live in the city of Norwich. I hear coyotes behind my house, and you have to be aware of that. But that's just one of the things. It's the ruralness of the area. They feel that they're being encroached upon.
You've mentioned jobs, taxes, regulations. Those are often top issues
Yes.
for a politician of really any stripe. Are there other key state issues that would be, priorities for you if you were elected?
Well, it's the way we spend the money. New York, I just rode down here on a terrible, terrible Route 12. And I know it's winter, and I know frost heaves and all of that. But man, that pothole in front of John's Body Shop at 12 and 12A, that's been there for a long time. That needs to be reconstructed there. The base is gone. So if we can spend billions on a Tesla plant in Buffalo that I don't think has yet to turn out any mass product, that money would be just $1 million in the 122nd district goes a long way. And it's so I'd like to see that more of the taxes being used to benefit everybody. Not only do the roads get fixed, infrastructure get fixed, bridges get painted, but people are working. And everybody needs to have the dignity and the pride of a job. I'd like to get more people working. But I have talked to people. I'm still a police officer, by the way, part-time. And I get into people's houses and intimate conversations. And I want to help them, and I want to see them have a better quality of life. But when they tell me if they get a job, they lose their benefits. So it's better for them to stay on benefits than to work. That's an upside-down system, and it can't be sustained. So there's something. I can go on and on about all kinds of things, So if you got a question, let me know.
Well, obviously, the fact that you have a background in law enforcement sort of begs the question, what do you think the state should be doing about the opioid crisis?
Well, the opioid crisis, that needs a lot of attention from many. It's a sickness, it's an addiction, and it's a crime. And all of those things come together. And I know that arresting people is probably the least favorable way to do it, but that arrest gets somebody in front of a judge. And the principal of the case, we used to call them defendants, but the principal of the case is in front of a judge, and the judge can actually order things to happen. The going to get counseling, going to get treatment, and maybe that's what it takes. So that's one step, but not everybody, a lot of times family members need to do that and take a step towards sobriety. But the opioid crisis, and at the same time of the opioid crisis, now we're talking about legalizing other marijuana. I know it's coming. I think the handwriting's on the wall. So let's prepare for that. And if they're going to be taxing it, let's use some of that tax money to help law enforcement with detecting impaired drivers, and also the treatment of that. And also, how about when there's an accident involving an impaired driver? I know that it's coming, so let's be real about it and let's prepare for it.
Let me ask you that question I mentioned before. What about your personality, your experiences, your skill set make you good for this line of work? Why do you think people should choose you?
I enjoy meeting new people. I enjoy helping people. I offer to help people whenever I see that my skill set could probably be a benefit. I like to help people when I see struggle. I try to be charitable. And this isn't going to be a career. I've already had a solid career as a police officer and went all the way up to the ranks to police chief. This is not going to be a career. Unlike a lot of politicians who get into office, I want to right now tell you that I support term limits. Now, there's a caveat that goes along with supporting term limits. You just don't get elected and maybe the people like that and they elect you again and then you say, I'm done, and disappear. So the caveat is you have to get other like-minded people into office at the same time, and sometimes you have to beat the drum about term limits to get other people to come on board. Otherwise, you've just spun your wheels in an abandoned ship, if you just get in and get out. But I am for term limits, and this is not going to be a career if I'm successful in this. I want to go to Albany. I want to be the voice of this rural 122nd district. I wanted to do things that if I can make an alliance with somebody that's going to help the 122nd district, from the other party. Agriculture here is in desperate need of people. And I was in a farmer's kitchen a couple days ago in the town of Butternuts, I was talking to the wife, waiting for the husband to come up from the barn. And I just in casual talking, what is he doing? And they sold their dairy, which I'm getting sick of hearing. There's so few, to have a dairy farm now, is very difficult. So they switched over to beef, and he's working alone because the minimum wage went up. They can't afford to hire a helper and feed themselves, and that's hard and dangerous work. So the minimum wage has affected agriculture. If the minimum wage were lower for experience, when the minimum wage went up, they wanted everybody to have a living wage and to raise a family on the minimum wage. You can't do that. There needs to be a step in. There needs to be a first toe in the into the workforce wage. And I don't know if the employer pays a portion and the state pays the other portion, but there's got to be a differentiation in the minimum wage because the farmers are getting hit with the now the unionization of farm workers, and little by little that's something that's getting nibbled away at. And that's something I just heard. The restrictions on spreading fertilizer on fields and runoff and cow flatulence. It's not a joke to these people. This is their way of life, and they feel like that's being nibbled away at. And there's plenty of agricultural workers of both parties. So my personality is to try and be helpful, to be honest, and and whenever I can, do the right thing.